All right, and today I'm here with Pandyjack. Jack, do you want to introduce yourself? Who are you? What is your relationship with the language learning community in Refold?
Sure, yeah. I'm Pandyjack. That's my Discord name. My name is Jamin. Um, I'm I live in America. I'm Indian, Indian American. Um, yeah. As for my linguistic background, I grew up trilingual, speaking English, Hindi, Gujarati. Um, Other than that, I've been involved with Refold since its inception. I'm a Right now I'm a moderator on the Russian server, um, since that's where I spend most of my time. Um, but yeah, it's just ever since Refold started, it's given me a community to kind of connect with other immersion learners. Before Refold, I didn't really know anyone who learned Russian the way I did. Um, Back then it was MIA, and now it's Refold. But yeah, just being able to connect with the community it's been really helpful. Yeah, but yeah, excited to be on here. Um,
Oh, thank you.
mhm.
Now, you mentioned that you grew up trilingual. That is
Yeah,
exciting. Do you want to enlighten us? Tell us about your three native languages.
sure. Yeah, I mean, the two Indian languages, they're basically like Hindi is the kind of lingua franca of the northern regions of
The
India
Hindi belt.
mostly. Yeah, yeah. It's mutually intelligible with Urdu, which is like basically the same language. Um, and then Gujarati is the language of the state I grew up in. So I lived in India for 20 years. Like I was coming back and forth between the U.S. and India, but I basically spent 20 years there. So that's my mother tongue, if you could call it, because all of my family speaks that Gujarati. Um, but yeah, all of my school, university education was entirely in English, so I guess that's why I speak it well.
How how
um,
common are English medium schools in
Very
India
common,
and
yeah.
abroad?
Yeah, in India they're very common, so most, I guess, parents want to send their kids to English medium schools because it just gives them an edge. Like most most of the top universities in India, they teach in English. So I guess only like a few, I don't know like the percentages, but like I think most people study in English medium schools in India these days, at least. Yeah.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it's very common.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is the relationship of Gujarati to Hindi and Urdu?
Um, they're similar, but I would say it's more like I don't have like a good analogy. Um, because like many of the words, the lexical similarity is really high, but the grammar is not the same. So like it sounds really different because so my roommate, he doesn't understand Gujarati, but he speaks Hindi. But so I showed him a clip, like we were watching something, and I asked him, "Do you understand anything?" And he was like, Pretty much nothing." So, and he was just like a normie, non-language learner. So he didn't have the ear of the language learner.
What
But
caused him to not be able to parse the Gujarati if the lexical similarity is pretty high?
I think it's the consonants are very different. They sound very different. The words are, even though it might be the same word, it's spoken in a different way. Um, and then I guess I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think it's the same structure. Like linguistically, the structures of the languages are very similar, but um, I guess it's just more, you know, like we use some words that Hindi doesn't use. Hindi uses some words that we don't use. So it's stuff like that. I think it's different enough where if somebody has not been exposed to it, they wouldn't really understand it. So I guess if it was more popular in like Indian pop culture, I think more people would understand it. Like Punjabi. So Punjabi is like a very popular language in the Indian pop culture, and like most most Hindi speakers understand at least some Punjabi because they've seen it in movies and stuff. Like they're constantly exposed to it. So I guess, yeah, I guess it's just about exposure. Yeah.
So can you give me an example
Mm.
of two cognate words in Gujarati and Hindi?
Mm. Let's see. Um,
So like I tend to
mm.
look for like correspondencies, usually with
Mm.
sound. A
Mm.
good example would be like I guess Ukrainian has like an E sound where it would be like an O or an U in Russian.
Maybe, yeah. I'm not super familiar with Ukrainian, but yeah, it could be. Yeah.
So are there any correspondencies like this
Mm.
with Gujarati and Hindi?
There are some words that are like exactly the same. Like the word for time is like samay, which is like exactly the same, pronounced exactly the
Right.
same.
Probably
Um,
alone.
yeah, probably a loan from Sanskrit, I think. Yeah, it's probably from Sanskrit. Um, well, like another cognate that sounds different. It's just really hard to think of something.
I
Um,
put you on the spot.
yeah, yeah.
Well, while you're thinking about
Mhm.
that, I do think that Link offers Gujarati for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw
They
that.
offer Gujarati, but they don't yet offer Hindi, which has
Mm.
been baffling to many people.
Yeah, I have no idea
So,
why. Yeah, that is.
living in the Philippines and speaking Filipino, I sometimes see Philippine stuff just in my day-to-day life. And last night I was in bed watching somebody who was not a native Tagalog speaker, but obviously Filipino.
Mm-hmm.
They were frog gigging. They were like hunting frogs with a gig.
Mm, mm,
It's like a little three-pronged spear thing, and
uh,
we do that in Kentucky. I don't
mm,
know about where you live,
mm,
in a more of a metro area, but they were frog gigging and they were trying really hard to speak Filipino, but
mm,
they ended up tagalizing some words that are just not used. So like the
mm.
conjugation of it was following Tagalog conjugation patterns, but that root word doesn't exist in Tagalog.
Ah.
Does that ever happen with Indian languages?
I mean, we use a lot of English words.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, like a Gujarati speaker
Mm-hmm.
who is not super competent in Hindi
Yeah.
accidentally, like,
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, that happens. So, yeah, I guess my grandma, yeah, she obviously speaks better Gujarati than Hindi. I mean, obviously she speaks Hindi. She can speak Hindi because they're just really similar in that regard. But yeah, she sometimes uses like words where she would be speaking Hindi, but she would just be using words from Gujarati, like just using the Hindi syntax, um, but like just using words from Gujarati. And like many people do that actually. Like if they've just lived in um, the state of Gujarat, they haven't really moved around, they don't have friends that speak Hindi, then they tend to do that. They just use the word that first comes to their mind, and since it's similar enough, they just go with it. Yeah.
gotcha. That's always fun.
Yeah.
So, you came into immersion learning
Mm-hmm.
and Refold and MIA, and you were doing Russian.
Yeah.
And in addition to Russian, you have a couple of dabbling languages,
Mm-hmm.
the strongest of which is Kazakh.
I would say,
Or maybe Spanish is higher, I'm not sure.
yeah, right now I'm not even sure as well because I think my Kazakh is catching up to my Spanish, but yeah, still think Spanish is easier to understand at this point. Yeah, yeah, because Kazakh is just too different. It's not related to anything I know linguistically.
Well, that's not totally true. You guys
Yeah,
do share a couple of
yeah,
Arabic loans,
yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah.
So you do have some of that the
Mm-hmm.
Arabic vocabulary from
Yeah.
speaking Hindi and
Yeah.
understanding Urdu.
Mm-hmm.
But I know what you mean. It's a Turkic language, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas Russian and Hindi and Gujarati and English are all Indo-European.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your journey learning Russian. So Russian is actually one of those interesting languages where CI type content is actually quite popular. You see
Yeah.
a lot of TPRS,
Mm-hmm.
um, Russian with Max, where they teach proficiency through storytelling, through comprehensible input. So tell us about that, and that'll be a lead up to how
Mm-hmm.
it was actually getting to use it when you were on your 3 week
Mm.
trip to Central Asia.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of good content. Even when I was in the beginner stages, I think Russian with Max was there at that point. I think the CI channel, I don't know, the comprehensible Russian channel. I don't think that was there, but I might be wrong. I might just not have
I've been
found it
meaning
yet.
to reach out to
Yeah.
her. I
Mm.
reached out to her a while back, and I think she's in our Discord community, right?
Yeah, she's there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been meaning to reach out to her and get her on
Mm.
the podcast.
Yeah, that would be super cool. Yeah, I think she is one of the bigger channels. I think she started it before a lot of the others, but uh, right now there are a bunch of channels which are doing CI, which I think is super great. Um, yeah, I think I did her videos, I think, but I think it was already too late for me at that point. Like, I was already starting to understand native speech. So I still did the CI videos for a bit, um, from YouTube, from her Patreon, but I only did it for like only a month. Then I was like, I should just move on to native content. Like, it would be much faster if I did
Your
that.
travel logs.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, you're a big fan of travel.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So you began learning Russian, and Russian is one of those languages that, for whatever reason, CI, TPR, TPRS, these sorts of comprehensible input type channels are quite big and quite popular,
Mm,
especially among teachers of Russian as a foreign language.
mm.
Um, and I guess that lent itself really well to getting started with MIA.
Yeah, but initially I think I wasn't doing like the CI stuff. I just started watching YouTube. I think that was just what I started with because before MIA I found Xiaoma NYC's video. I guess uh, I don't know. I don't remember his name, but
Ari,
yeah, Ari. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, he kind of was my first intro to immersion learning. But I think just a few months after that, I found a video of Matt's, and then I just started with that. So they were just really close. I tried a few methods in the beginning, like I tried the Fluent Forever method, the Gold List method, all those different things I tried. But I
the
think I
fluent
just, yeah.
forever method, I don't know it so well. I find myself often linking to
Mm,
Gab Weiner's
mm,
videos because he's got some interesting videos on pronunciation.
yeah, yeah.
Um, because I believe he was a trained opera singer,
Mm,
so they learn the IPA and they learn how to at
mm,
least pronounce sounds in order to sing in that language, even if they don't
mm,
understand it.
mm.
But I don't actually know too much about the method.
It starts at least when I was doing it. Like this was almost 4 years ago. It was it's they have like a base of 625 words, which you start with. That's like your 1K deck, so to speak. And then they also have this, yeah, the pronunciation trainer. So recommend doing the pronunciation deck, and I think after that it was just um, they had an app. I don't I don't know if it's still around, but they did have an app where they had all of this like packaged into one like paid package or something like that. But I think that was it when I was doing it. I haven't read the book. I think he also has a book, Fluent Forever, but I haven't read the book. So, but I
Yeah,
think it's
he and the method
mostly,
have been
mm,
around for a long time.
yeah, 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 yeah. But he doesn't advocate immersion as far as I know. He just has this like, knowing a basic number of words and then going
Yeah.
from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think now that you're jogging my memory, it's words like the different modes of transportation, different
Mm,
animals, and things that you're going to need to
yeah, right.
communicate.
Yeah.
But I do think he does push sounding good. I think
Yeah.
that he has an interesting approach where, like, he does require people to study the sounds
Mm,
and
mm,
try to at least sound native, even if their
mm.
vocabulary is only 625 words.
Yeah, yeah.
So after that, um, you got into Xiaoma,
Mm-hmm.
and then you found Matt, and then you started just, I guess, immersing. So you were sort of in the MIA community before Refold was even a thing.
Yeah. I guess there was no community. I just watched Matt's videos and I read the website, the roadmap. Um, but other than that, I didn't know of any communities. I think later I learned that there were like a few unofficial communities, like for Spanish, for Japanese, but I don't think there were any for Russian, or at least I was not aware of any. Um, but I was never in any of the Discord servers or anything like that before then. So, but yeah, I was doing kind of. I tried everything. I tried the sentence mining thing. I didn't really do it that much because it was just, I don't use Anki that often. I did do it with Refold, but I didn't do it with MIA because when I was doing MIA, I was a lot worse at Russian. I was, I guess, like maybe 2A, 2B when I was doing MIA. Um, but yeah, I think all the um, principles, that all the habits I built when I was doing MIA, they carried over into Refold really well. And then Refold just kind of added some new things like new tools and stuff like that. Which I started using. I started sentence mining more efficiently and that kind of,
You
um,
guys
yeah.
over on the Russian
Mm.
server, the Russian community, you're fond of Gold Dict?
Yeah, Golden Dict. Yeah,
Golden Dict, yeah.
yeah,
Sort of like the the dictionary everybody recommends.
yeah, yeah. I think it's like mm, maybe it's something that no, I think it's built by a Chinese developer if I'm not wrong. It's no longer being developed as far as I know, but I think the Russian community, like the Russian internet, just took it and then they have all these dictionaries for it. Like there's a whole um, listing page. There's a site you can find dictionaries for like a whole lot of languages, like even like all sorts of languages, like African languages, European languages, Slavic languages, of course, and like it's wild. So um, yeah, but it's a good application. It's just a pop-up dictionary, but it just integrates really well with at least with Windows and I think Linux as well. You can just have a hotkey and
I love
translate anything. Yeah.
I love how different parts of the internet can latch on to certain
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Like Russian internet has definitely latched on to CI content,
Mm.
more so than other parts of the internet. And the Russian community, Russian speakers have latched on to Golden Dict,
Mm.
which, from my point of view, as somebody who's not a Russian learner, is like some
Mm.
obscure dictionary software, and
Yeah.
the user experience of it's very rough to me.
Mm.
It's like
Mm. Mm.
I don't know. It doesn't. Things are weirdly sized, and like the
Yeah.
UI is wonky,
Yeah.
and like it requires some TLC to get to work on a modern
Mm-hmm.
operating
Mm-hmm.
system. But they've taken to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've been at Russian for 4 years, and
Mm-hmm.
you did an input-heavy approach, but you've
Yeah.
been outputting for some time. Now, I kind of spoiled it a little bit earlier, and I mentioned that you just got back from a 3-week trip to Russian-speaking areas.
Mm-hmm.
But even before then, I believe you were outputting regularly with either a tutor or a language exchange partner.
Both. Yeah.
So how was it? How do you feel? Are you firmly stage 3 plus now? Are you stage 4?
Yeah, I think I transitioned to like I felt like I could transition to stage 4 just a few months before I went on my trip. So I think that was like 2 or 3 months ago. So yeah, but I think I've been because that only criteria I know for stage 4 is like you should be comfortable expressing yourself in the language and you should be able to have conversations with a native speaker without them having to, you know, dumb down their language or something like that. And I think, yeah, I think I reached that point around maybe sometime like in the around June or like so 6 months into this year. Um, yeah, but I've been outputting since, let me see, like September of like outputting heavily. I mean, before that I was outputting, but not regularly. But regularly, I would say September of 2022. Yeah, 2022. So yeah, almost a year.
And how did it feel finally going to the Russosphere, going to
Mm.
Central Asia and getting to speak Russian daily in person with people? How was that?
It felt a lot more normal than I had expected. I expected it would feel a lot more special and a lot more kind of like a big thing, but it just felt normal. Like I was, I guess because I was just used to speaking Russian so often, like I didn't really have that um, novelty factor while doing it. But it was definitely, I think, uh, I felt like I think I reached my like I felt there was a limit to where I could go. After which my brain would tell me basically like I would get signals that like this is like you can't go higher than this, like you can't be engaging in Russian more than this, like so I think that was really helpful so that, because when you're just immersing, you don't get that because you're not really in the environment. You're not surrounded by the language, so you kind of pick and choose what you immerse in. Pick and choose the people you talk to.
A
But the
good
real,
example
mm,
that I have given on the podcast is Bree. Bree is very
mm,
good at Spanish, much better than
mm,
I am.
mm,
But because she does not use Spanish in her day-to-day life, she sometimes has weird little gaps, right?
mm,
Like, what do you call a shoelace, or
yeah,
a coffee pot, or a
mm,
teapot? Things
mm.
like this. And did you have those gaps when you were there? Were you grasping for like, oh, what's the word for shoelace in Russian?
Uh, I think I knew the word for shoelace, but I think the most my most of my lookups were from restaurant menus because um, like many of these like ingredients that we use and I had to be extra careful, right? Because I'm vegetarian, so I actually need to know what's in the dish before I can order it. I can't just order it like a regular person who eats everything can. So that's why I had to like any unknown word I would just look up and like just to see whether it's like is it a type of meat or is it like a fish or something that I can't eat. Um, so I think most of my lookups
That
were
sounds rough
yeah,
because
yeah.
what little I know about Central Asia, it's a very meat-heavy culture.
It is, yeah. So it was kind of challenging to find places where I could eat. I mean, there are definitely places. So if you kind of look for them, they're there. But you kind of have to settle with a limited selection of foods that you can enjoy. Um, yeah, because most of the national dishes and everything, they're all made of meat. So, but there's stuff to be found. I think if I would be going there for like a longer period, then um, I would be able to figure it out basically. Yeah, because all the ingredients and everything I can find, and yeah, but yeah, for vegans, I think it would be a really big challenge because I didn't see any vegan restaurants there. Like there was nothing. Yeah.
And you're vegetarian, not vegan.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you do like dairy products.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So the restaurant stuff surprised you the most. Um, what were some of the surprising things about being in like a target language country and outputting? It's
Hmm.
finally real. It's not somebody on a chat app on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
It's right there in your face.
I think one thing was like I was just constantly thinking how the other person is perceiving me. Like if it was not a friend, like it was just a random person I was interacting with. Had that just constant thought in my head, like, are they like understanding me, or more than that, like how are they perceiving me? Is there some sort of a um, like, are they having difficulties? Are they having to like listen in specifically to understand what I'm saying? I think those kinds of thoughts were there, which are not really there when you're just talking to someone on the internet. Um, but other than that, I guess it's just a lot more anxiety inducing to speak in person, especially with strangers. I think like with people I already knew, like I have some friends there. um, it was not that bad. I could just speak like I do normally, but with strangers there was definitely a level of anxiety. And but on the other hand, like, maybe contradicting the anxiety was, I've just felt a lot more free in my Russian use, because I could just speak Russian like without having to switch to any language. I think that was the biggest thing for me, where I would just be able to never even use English. I would just be able to start my day in Russian and end my day in Russian. That was the biggest thing. I think that was one of the best kind of novel experiences I had over there. Yeah, but
The Russosphere is surprisingly diverse.
hmm,
I feel like a lot of listeners who are not familiar with Russian may not be totally aware that Russia itself is very ethnically diverse,
yeah,
let alone the countries outside of Russia that speak
hmm,
Russian.
hmm,
Um, so, it's very rare to have somebody who's got this Desi background
hmm,
speaking, say, maybe Korean.
hmm.
But did you find that to be the case when you were speaking Russian? Did they peg you instantly as a foreigner or a likely
Uh,
foreigner?
I think so. One interesting observation I made, I think it was like if I was clean shaven, like they would be more. I think they were perceiving me as more of a Russian speaker. I don't know how that works. Maybe it's just like a thing that like people perceive. But if I wasn't clean shaven, I think I was feeling a level of like they were like people were treating me as a foreigner more than a Russian speaker. I mean, that might not be true. That might just be my perception of how they were perceiving me. But um, I think that was the only thing. I think some people were more curious than the others. They would ask like, where are you from? They would like pick up on my accent, and then they would ask me, how why are you learning Russian? Like, how do you speak it? But I think most people, they just like staff at restaurants, and like just regular people you interact with at like shops and stuff. They don't, as long as they understand you. I don't think they pay any attention to whether you're a foreigner or not. um, it's just when you're like having like a longer conversation with a person, where they kind of they tune into your accent more, and then they kind of figure it out. But I think in regular conversations, I don't think uh, there was any sort of there were any sort of issues like that. Like because another thing is, like, there are a lot of Indian students in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, so they kind of already know, like, how Indians look and stuff. But the thing is, most of those students, they don't really speak Russian or Kazakh. Um, which is really strange. So I don't really know how they kind of perceived me, because kind of I have like a generic looking face, like from anywhere in the, that West Asia, South Asia.
So,
So,
as
maybe they
in
thought I was, yeah.
our pre-podcast chit chat that we
Mm-hmm.
had, I showed you my very,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know, very European American relative who
Mm.
looks just like you.
Yeah.
Um, and in my homeland, we have a whole bunch of people from Bosnia.
Mm.
Uh, so when we are in an area with a lot of the Bosnian diaspora, people just assume he's Bosnian.
Oh.
Um, but to my knowledge, he's, generic Western European. He's got a Welsh
Mm.
last name,
Mm.
and he's just a little bit toastier than I am.
Ah.
But yeah, you look like my nephew who is not Desi. I don't know
Yeah.
what to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's just that where, like, um, I guess in that kind of Turkic sphere, like I could maybe, they like some people might just take me as, one of their
And
own.
Turkic
Uh,
groups as a
yeah.
whole they really vary a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got some who look very much Middle Eastern, North African,
Mm-hmm.
some that look very much East Asian,
Right.
some that look Eurasian. It's all
Mm.
over.
Yeah. 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 Even in Mexico, I think some people they just took me for just a Mexican, just like a Hispanic person. So they would just come up to me, start speaking to me in Spanish, and I would be like, hold on. I'm not who you think I am. Yeah.
What was your favorite part of the 3-week trip you took to the Russosphere?
Um, I guess the best thing was just meeting uh, my friends who I'd been chatting with just online. I think that was the best part. Um, Other than that, I think it was the like the trips I took, um, to all these like it's the like they have a lot of mountains and lakes, like really scenic places where it's just like really really beautiful there. So I think visiting those was maybe number two, and then yeah, just exploring the cities, like the kind of the combination of like new architecture and like old Soviet architecture, kind of.
Isn't Astana Nur Sultan, isn't that a very modern city?
So yeah, I wasn't in Astana. Astana is a really, yeah,
Okay.
it's a really modern city. Yeah, but like because I think it's newer and they're trying to build more stuff, making it like a business hub or something like that. But I was in Almaty, um, which is
Okay.
not the capital, but like it's the biggest city I think in Kazakhstan.
It's like the cultural
Um,
capital.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, it was interesting to see kind of just exploring, like the you know the mix of like Russian, Kazakh, and like Soviet influence, and then like just Turkic things and Kazakh things mixed with all of those things, and it was just really interesting exploring all of that. And since I was also dabbling in Kazakh, it was just interesting, reading all the signs, reading the menus, in both in Russian and Kazakh, and comparing, contrasting. Yeah.
I know that we said we would not get into politics, and I hope
Mm.
this is not super political, but have you found that they're actually shifting over to the Latin alphabet for Kazakh, or are people sticking with what
No,
they know?
no, it still hasn't happened yet. It's only happening, I guess, in mostly on the internet. Like some people, they just started using the Latin alphabet. Um,
I feel like
but other
Kazakh Wikipedia might have moved over as well.
they have they have an option for it, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
you can choose the alphabet you want the page to show up in. But like I saw some signs that were in like the Latin alphabet, but I think most of them were still in Cyrillic. Yeah.
And do you prefer it in Cyrillic?
I guess I'm just more used to it. But I mean, to be honest, I haven't really immersed that much in Kazakh. But I think both look fine. I mean, there's right now there's no um, like there's a few versions of the Latin script floating around. There's the official version, which many people don't like because it like has some letters that are like not used anywhere. But like so they have the I think for the sh sound they have an sh and not the s with a diacritic
with the tail.
um,
Yeah.
in the bottom. Yeah, which I think most Turkic languages use. I think Turkish uses that. So I don't think there's a finalized alphabet yet. But I think the one of the most popular ones, like the community built ones, it looks pretty good. It's almost like Turkish. So
Turkish has
and
done a great job of
yeah, yeah,
repurposing the Latin alphabet.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty script. I mean, um, and you know, they've come from, an Abjad type system,
Hmm.
and props to Ataturk for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think it's even after like 4 years of being exposed to the Cyrillic script, it's still easier to like parse the document written in the Latin alphabet. Just because I'm so used to it. It's much easier to just if I'm skimming something, I can just like the letters just come at you a lot more easier than if it was in Cyrillic.
How much of that is because you're a non-native Cyrillic user
Hmm.
versus the fact that Cyrillic, especially printed Cyrillic, they're all kind of the same height, you know? There's no real
Hmm.
ascenders or descenders. The Kazakh Cyrillic script does have a couple of new
Yeah.
letters,
Mm-hmm.
but I've often wondered, is Cyrillic just inherently harder to parse? Because again, the letters are pretty much all the same
Hmm.
height, you know?
I don't think so.
Totally
I mean,
unscientific here.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
something that I wondered.
I think if it's like smaller passages, I can parse them in Cyrillic. But if it's like a long text, like if you give me a book with like 2 pages in front of me, like in English, I would just immediately be able to like parse some keywords and like know like what the book is about and stuff. But in Russian, like I would have to kind of like pay attention and like concentrate, and then I would be able to pick some things up, because like the words they're like they have different forms, right? So you kind of have to look at a word and then you have to do one more step and kind of lematize it in your head and then say, oh, okay, it's this word, to kind of get to the keyword. So I guess that would play into it, but I think yeah, I think it's just the fact that I'm not a native speaker that kind of hinders my ability to do that, because I think most native
Uh,
speakers of any language should be able to kind of skim through a document
yeah,
relatively
there's
easily.
there's something out there that's been posed as the quote unquote neo-literate dyslexia
Hmm.
hypothesis.
Hmm.
And I think you might be familiar with it.
Uh,
Um,
no, I don't.
a linguist somewhere in the
Hmm.
world decided that if you attempt to learn a new script as an adult,
Hmm.
you have the same functionality as somebody with dyslexia,
Oh.
meaning that you never truly acquire it
Hmm.
the same way as a native speaker would, somebody who
Hmm.
acquired it as a child.
Hmm.
I don't know much about it, but that's my
Hmm.
understanding of the theory.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it seems like adults tend to not have the same level of functionality in their new script.
Hmm.
Um, Even though Cyrillic and the Latin alphabet are kind of like cousins, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they're very much descended from,
Hmm.
the same sort of tree.
Yeah. 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 They're really similar. Yeah. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. I mean, I think that could be. Yeah. But like, then again, like it depends on the script, right? I think comparing something like Greek or Cyrillic to somebody learning Arabic, I think that would be a there would be a big difference, um, in the
Sure.
from an English speaker's perspective.
I found
Mm.
Dewanagari to be very headache-inducing.
Mm.
So yeah, I can imagine. But I learned my kana and a handful of kanji when I was in high school,
Mm.
and I find them to be much less intimidating on a page than I
Mm.
did finding some of the newer scripts. So I've attempted to learn Hindi's version of Devanagari. I've
Mm.
tried to learn a couple of African scripts,
Mm.
and I definitely feel the pain of not being able to
Yeah.
parse them very well.
Mm.
And again, I don't know if that's just because I don't actually speak the languages,
Mm.
or if it's because we as adult learners do have some
Mm.
sort of enduring deficit. I'm not sure.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I mean, even I like because I don't really. I'm not a big reader in neither Hindi nor Gujarati. So even when I read something in those languages, it takes me longer than it would take me if it was just spoken to me. Like I could speed it up like 3x and still understand it, but I wouldn't be able to read it that fast because I just don't have the experience of doing it. Yeah.
Do you find that on the internet people just use the Latin alphabet?
Yeah, definitely. I think a very small amount of people actually use the uh, Devanagari or the Gujarati scripts. Yeah, most people they prefer Latin because it's just easier to type. They're just used to typing in English, and then they just it's easier when you want to include English words in the sentence. You just use the Latin alphabet, and then people will understand you either way. So why go through all the trouble of actually switching keyboards and then typing and then switching back? Yeah,
They are very pretty scripts, though.
yeah. Yeah, they look good. Yeah, especially like if you're reading a book, like they can be it can be very aesthetically pleasing. Yeah.
How about handwriting? Have you practiced much of the Russian handwriting? So I know that
No.
Russian cursive is very different. Um,
From what I know, it's not that different. It just requires practice. Because I've heard from people that if you already know how to write in cursive in the Latin alphabet, then it'll be like really easy for you to pick it up in Russian. I just never had the motivation to do that. I guess one motivation would be to if I wanted to pass the B2 or a C1 test, which includes writing, um, then I would need to handwrite an essay, I think. Um, but other than that, there's really no motivation for me to learn that uh, cursive script. But I can write like in block letters, but I don't
okay,
think it's
but is
really
that
yeah.
typical? I was always
No.
under the impression that people, at least in the Russo sphere, don't print. Like I print everything in English, and
Mm, mm,
I used to work um, doing forensics as a forensic technician,
mm,
and the doctor I worked for
mm.
insisted everything be in small capitals.
Ah.
So I wrote in capitals, but I wrote them very
Mm,
tiny
ah.
for writing reports.
Mm,
Um, and I found myself still doing that to this day. I found
mm,
myself wanting to write in tiny caps,
mm.
but Russian speakers tend to like their cursive. They all tend to know it, even the young
Yeah,
people.
everyone knows it. Yeah, I think yeah. So if you don't know how to write in cursive, it's definitely a tell that you're not a native speaker. So I think they don't really require it. Even in the exam, you can write in block letters and you can still pass the exam. Even I think even you C2 you can pass with just block letters. They just look at the content. Um, so I think I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's not that hard to learn. Um, I think if you already know how to write in cursive, then you can just skill transfers over really easily. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, unfortunately, my cursive is almost non-existent in English.
Yeah.
Are there cursive versions of the Indic scripts?
To my knowledge, no. There might be calligraphy, but I've never looked into it. Because the way we're taught in schools is just regular writing, so we just write it how it's written, how it would be on the screen. Um, yeah. I mean, it definitely differs, like handwriting is not as clean as a font is going to be, but um, as far as I know, there's no real cursive there.
Yeah, writing
Yeah.
using Devanagari always. Am I saying that right? I feel like I keep saying it the wrong way.
It's like the correct pronunciation is Devanagari.
Devanagari. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
So I like how it has like the little roof at the top
yeah,
where the
yeah.
letters hang from. That's pretty cool.
Mm.
Again, it's a very aesthetic script.
Yeah.
So how long have you been back in the States since your trip?
I guess a month. Yeah, it's been a
It's been a
month,
month.
I think. Yeah.
And how has your trip to the Russosphere
Hmm.
impacted how you're engaging with Russian now that you're back home?
I think yeah, it has changed it a little bit. I think I'm engaging with Russian on a lot more of a how do I say it, like like I don't feel the need to compel myself to immerse anymore. Like I can just, like, for example, like if I were reading a book in English, I could just I could read it without feeling like I have to read in Russian, so I take it a lot more easier because I already have that confidence of being able to navigate a Russian speaking country, with the level I have. So I guess, yeah, my confidence in the language has gone up a lot after the trip, and I just engage with it with the language a lot more thoughtfully, I would say. Like if I'm not feeling up to it, I can choose not to immerse. If I want to immerse, it's easier to immerse because I can enjoy content even if there's parts which I don't understand. Yeah, I think it's done. It's made immersing easier, and I think learning less stressful. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the C2 exam earlier. Do you have plans to take, what's the name of the CEFR exam for Russian?
It's TORFL. Yeah.
Oracle.
Yeah.
Do you have plans to take it?
I mean, yeah, I do actually. I can take it. So I took part in an Olympiad, I think late last year. It was like a free thing they had on their website. I think the St. Petersburg University hosts like these exams and then the Olympiads. And in the Olympiad, I think I qualified in the second category of like prize winners. They had, like, if you translate it from Russian. So that gave me like a free pass to take any of the exams if I wanted to until the end of this year. So I have been thinking about it, but I really
it's
don't
almost
have
the end of the year.
yeah. So, but it's not. I guess it's just not motivating enough for me to kind of prepare for it. Sit through like 2 days of like tests and writing. Yeah, but I think I'm still thinking about it. I'm still unsure. But it will be cool to kind of go through that experience. I don't think I would go for C2 just yet because I think that's like a lot harder, because it's basically meant for people who want to study like Russian philology, like they want to study about the Russian language or they want to become a teacher. Um, so I think C1 is plenty good for like just to kind of get a better understanding of where you stand in your knowledge of the language. So I think if I were to try, I would try for C1. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And how much time do you have? Do you have enough time this year to potentially take the C1 exam? Is it too late to register? I know nothing about this.
Yeah, I'm also not entirely sure. I think I might be able to because we still have 2 months. So I think it should be possible to schedule something before the end of the year. But I'll have to look into that. I think, yeah, Andrew on the Russian server, he's taken the C1 exam. So yeah, he knows a lot more about it. So maybe I'll get some details from him.
Well, good luck if you do end up taking it.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're nearing the end of our hour. Before we go, I've got two questions for you. First question, is there anything I didn't bring up that you wanted to talk about? Because now's your time.
I guess I don't know. One thing, yeah, I guess I wanted to kind of I've been thinking about is like I think like many people in the Refold community, like they at least like I'm not super keyed into the community right now as I was before, but at least earlier I was seeing a lot of people just trying to optimize their process, like do as much as possible to kind of quicken their progress and stuff like that. And then there were like a lot of posts in the wellness category of like people burning out, and then like not having time for immersion and feeling bad about it. So I think I have like a few thoughts on that. Like I think most people who are learning, I think in Refold they're learning for their hobby, right? They don't really have a need for the language. I mean some people do, mostly I guess English learners, who want to kind of work in English or that sort of thing. But I think most other learners, they're mostly learning for fun, right? So I think what kind of from my experience, it's always been the case that if I tried really hard for like any area of the language, it would always cause anxiety. I would start comparing myself to others, comparing myself to my previous stats, and it would just get into this vicious cycle. So I would just say that taking it easy and taking a break if you feel like you need it is like a really it's a good idea, like almost always. Like even if you actually need the language, like you're preparing for a test, I think it like listening to your brain, when it needs a break, I think that's always a good thing to do, like just like health wise.
For sure. Yeah, and we actually talked about this last week, and that'll be going out this week, and then this will be going out
You're right,
in the future.
yeah.
But Bree, Ryan, Tyler, and I, we all did a little bit of a impromptu episode talking about healthy language learning.
Yeah.
And that might have answered my last question for you, which was, what is your parting advice? What is your sage advice? And I think you just gave it.
Yeah.
Cool. Jack, it was so good having you on. This is the second time I've seen your face in like 3 years of knowing you. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being a very helpful admin in the community, moderating the Russian server, letting us know when there are things going on. It was great having you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at Clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.
Hey, as you know, there's a lot of language learning advice out there, which can make it kind of overwhelming and difficult to actually get going on your own learning. If you feel like you're struggling to figure out language learning, you're not alone. It's an extremely complicated process with tons of different steps. If you're looking for a step-by-step guide to create the perfect language learning routine for you, then you have to check out our new course. We spent thousands of hours designing a simple and straightforward process that you can use to create your own personalized language routine that actually works. We understand that every learner is different and that you have to roll with the punches and adapt. Every day for 30 days, I walk you through everything you need to know to build an effective learning routine, no matter your circumstances. We give you the advice and resources you need to ensure your success, so you don't have to waste time looking for stuff to do and can focus on learning. And if any questions do come up, don't worry. We are always there to answer any questions and clear up confusion. And it's all backed by our 90-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. If, for whatever reason, something's not quite working for you, we insist you get every penny back. It's time for you to stop wishing that you could learn a second language. It's time to become the master of your language learning journey. Check out the link below to get instant access and start your journey today.